Hello everyone, today I will tell you about educational research. Start from chapter 11 till 14. About the first correction design and then survey design, grounded theory, and the last ethnographic design. In the correction design, is of define correction research and describe when to use it and how to develop. And then we identify the two types of correlational design. Describe the key characteristic of correlational design. Identify potential ethical issues in conducting correlational research. Identify steps in conducting a correlation study. The last is the criteria for evaluating a correlation study. What is correlation research? When do you use it and how did it develop? So a correlational design provides an opportunity for you to predict score and explain the relationship among variables. Ini untuk memprediksi skor dan menjelaskan hubungan di antara variabel. In correlational research design, investigators use the correlation statistical test to describe and measure the degree of association or relationship between two or more variables outside of score. A correlation is a statistical test to determine the tendency of pattern for two or more variables or two sets of data to vary consistently. In the case of only two variables, this means that two variables share common variance, or they covary together. To say that two variables covary has a somewhat complicated mathematical basis. Covary means that we can predict a score on one variable with knowledge about the individual score on another variable. A simple example might illustrate this point. Assume that score on a math quiz for grade student range for 30 until 90. The statistic that expresses a correlation statistic as a linear relationship is the product moment correlation coefficient. It's also called the bivariate correlation, zero order correlation, or simply R, and it's indicated by an R for its notation. When do you use correlation research? Use the design when you seek to relate two or more variables to see if they influence each other. That is the relationship between teacher who enters developmentally appropriate practice and their use of the whole language approach reading instruction. This design allows you to predict an outcome such as the prediction, the ability, quality of schooling, student motivation, and academic coursework influence student achievement. You also use the design when you know and can apply statistical knowledge based on calculating the correlation statistical test. How did correlation research develop? The history of correlation research draws on the themes of the origin and development of the correlation statistical test and the procedure for using and interpreting the test. Statisticians first developed the procedure for calculating the correlation statistic in the late 19th century. Okay, next, what are the type of correlation design? The type of correlation design refers the investigator correlate two or more variable. Jadi menginvestigasi hubungan di antara dua atau lebih variable. They report the correlation statistical test and mention the use of multiple variable. Readers find this variable specifically. Jadi pembaca menemukan a variable yang spesifik mengikuti in the purpose statement. Mengikuti purpose statement, the research question or the table reporting the statistical procedure. The researcher, peneliti, mengumpulkan data at one point in time. The researcher collect data at one point in time. Evidence for this procedure will be found in the administration for instrument in one sitting. To students in explanatory correlation research, the investigators are not interested in either past or future performance of participant. And then the investigator menganalisis all participants, semua participant as a single group. Compare, membandingkan eksperimen that involve multiple group or treatment condition. The researcher collects score, mengumpulkan skor nilai-nilai from only one group, dari satu group, and doesn't divide the group into categories or factors. Unlike experimental research, a level of information from the group are used, rather than divide score on self-esteem into high and low categories of score, as would be done in experimental research. Correlational researchers use all score on continuum such as from 10 until 90. And next, the researcher obtained at least 2 scores for each individual in the group, 1 for each variable. In the method discussion, the correlation investigator will mention how many scores were collected from each participant, and then the researcher reports the use of the correlation statistical test or extension of it. In the data analysis, this is the basic feature of this type of research. In addition, the researcher include a report about the strength and the direction of the correlational test to provide additional information. And then the last finally, the researcher makes interpretation or draw conclusion. Yang terakhir, peneliti membuat interpretation or menggambarkan kesimpulan dari hasil tes statistical. It's important to note, penting itu dicatat that the conclusion mencatat kesimpulan don't establish a probable cause and effect or causal inference relationship because the researcher can use only statistical control. For example, like control over variable using statistical procedure rather than the more rigorous control, physically altering the condition. Example such as in experiment. In correlational research, the investigator takes the participant as they are without experimental intervention. Thus, author of a correlation study often use the phrase degree of association between two variables. The purpose of prediction research design is to identify variables that will predict an outcome or criterion. In this form of research, the investigator identifies one or more, jadi identifikasi satu atau lebih predictor variable and a criterion or outcome variable. A predictor variable is a variable used to make a forecast about an outcome in correlational research. In the case of predicting teachers such as in a school, the predictor may be mentoring during teacher training of years of experience teaching. In much prediction, research investigators often use more than one predictor variable. The outcome being predicted in correlation research, however, is called the criterion variable. In our example, teachers such as is the criterion variable. Although more than one outcome can be predicted, the typical educational study includes only one criterion variable. To identify a prediction study, look for the following characteristic. The characteristic is the first, the author typically include the word prediction in the title. It might also be in the purpose statement of research question. Second, the researcher typically measures the predictor variables as at the one point in time and the criterion variable at a later point in time. Therefore, you should examine. And then a study to determine if the researcher built a time dimension into the design. For example, the predictor of teacher such as mentoring is measured during a student-teacher training program, whereas success is measured later after the student have performed as teacher. The author forecasts future performance. They usually state this intent in the purpose statement or in the research question. In the justification of the research problem, writer also mentioned their intent to predict some outcome. A prediction study will report correlation using the correlational statistical test, but it may include advanced statistical procedure. For example, the author may be interested in several predictions that help explain the criterion, although simple linear regression explained later. Address interest multiple regression also addressed later provide a more complex formula. What are the key characteristics of correlational design? The first, display of scores, scatter plots, and matrix. Scatter plots and matrix. For example, from scatter plots, like this, scatter plots, and then association between score, direction, form, and strength, multiple variable analysis, partial correlation, and multiple regression. Display of score. If you have to score, if you have to score in correlation riset berhubungan dengan penelitian, you can plot this score on a graph or scatter plot or present them in a table or correlation matrix. Scatter plot researchers plot score for two variables on a graph to provide a visual picture of the form of the score. It allows researchers to identify the type of association among variables and locate extreme score. Association between score. After the correlation researcher graph score and produce a correlation matrix, they can then interpret the meaning of the association between score. This call for understanding the direction of the association, the form of the distribution, degree of association, and its strength. What is the direction of the association? When examining a graph, it's important to identify if the points intersect or move in the same or opposite direction. In a positive correlation indicated by a one correlation coefficient, the point moves in the same direction. That is when x increases, so does y, or alternatively, if x decreases, so does. What is the form of the association? Correlational researchers identify the form of the plot score as linear or nonlinear. What is the degree and strength of association? Degree of association means that the association between two variables or set of score in correlation coefficient. And then multiple variable analysis. In many correlation studies, researchers predict outcomes based on more than one predictor variable. Thus, they need to account for the impact of each variable. To multiple variable analysis approaches are partial correlation and multiple regression. Partial correlation. In many research situations, we study 3, 4, or 5 variables as predictor of outcomes. The type of variable called a mediating or interweaving variable stand between the independent and dependent variable and influence both of them. This variable is different from a control variable that influence the outcome in an experiment. We use partial correlation to determine the amount of variance that an interweaving variable explains in both the independent and dependent variable. Multiple regression correlation researchers use the correlation statistic to predict future score. To see what impact multiple variables have on an outcome, researchers use regression analysis. We will start with understanding a regression line and then move on to analyzing using regression. A regression line is a line of best fit for all of the points of score on the graph. This line comes the closest to all of the points on the plot, and it's calculated by drawing a line that minimizes the square distance of the point from the line. The next, multiple regression or multiple correlation is a statistical procedure for examining the combined relationship of multiple independent variables with a single dependent variable. In regression, the variation in the dependent variable is explained by the variance of each independent variable, the relative importance of each predictor, as well as the combined effect of all independent variables, the proportion of criterion variance explained by all predictors. Next, potential ethical issues in conducting correlation research. Ethical issues arise in many phases of the correlational research process. In data collection, ethics relate to adequate sample size, lack of control, and the inclusion of as many predictors as possible. In data analysis, research needs a complete statement of finding to include effect size and the use of appropriate statistics. Analysis cannot include making of data in recording and presenting study. The writer should include statement about relationship rather than causation, a willingness to share data, and publishing in scholarly outlet. Step in conducting a correlational study. First, determine if a correlational study best addresses the researcher's problem or correlational study is used when a need exists to study a problem requiring the identification of the direction and degree of association between two obstacles. Second, identify individual to study ideal. Jadi identify individu to study ideally. You should randomly. Jadi harus memilih acak. You should randomly select the individual to generalize result to the population and seek then permisi untuk mengumpulkan data, seek permission to collect the data from responsible authorities and from the institutional review board. Third, identify 2 or more measures for each individual in the study because the basic idea of correlational research is to compare, membandingkan partisipan in the single group, on 2 or more characteristic measure of variable in the research question need to be identified. 4. Collect data and monitor potential. The next step is to administer the instrument and collect at least 2 sets of data from each individual. The actual research design is quite simple as a visual presentation. 5. Analyze the data and represent the result. The objective in correlation research is to describe the degree of association between 2 or more variables. 6. Interpret the result. The final step in conducting a correlational study is interpreting the meaning of the result. This requires discussing the magnitude and the direction of the result in a correlational study, considering the impact of intervening variable in a partial correlation study, interpreting the regression weight of variable in a regression analysis, and developing a predictive equation for use in prediction study. And the last, about how do you evaluate a correlational study? The first, to evaluate and assess the quality of a good correlation study, author and consider. The second, an adequate sample size for hypothesis testing. Third, the display of correlation result in a metric or graph. 4. An interpretation about the direction and magnitude of the association between 2 or more variables. 5. An assessment of the magnitude of the relationship based on confusion of determination, p-value, effect size, or the size of the coefficient. 7. The choice of an appropriate statistic analysis. 8. The identification of predictor, the criteria variable. 9. If a visual model of the relationship is advanced, the researcher indicates the expected direction of the relationship among variables or the predicted direction based on observed data. And the last, the clear identification of the statistical procedures. Next, about chapter 12, survey design. Survey design. What is survey research? When do you use it and how did it develop? Survey research design are procedures in quantitative research in which investigators administer a survey to sample or to the entire population of people to describe the attitudes, opinion, behavior, or characteristic of the population. In this procedure, survey researchers collect quantitative number data using questionnaires. For example, mail questionnaires are interviewing, for example, one-on-one interview, and statistically analyze the data to describe trend about response to question and to test research question or hypothesis. They also interpret the meaning of the data by relating result of the statistical test back to past research study. When do you use survey research? You use survey research to describe trend, such as community interest in school-bound issues or state or national trends about mandatory student uniform policy. You also use survey research to determine individual opinions about policy issues, such as whether students need a choice of school to attend. Next, how did survey research develop? Surveys have been widely used in education for many years. Early survey dates back to 1870 when Marc Antoine Julien de Paris designed International Survey of National Education System. Survey examines social problems including educational issues ranging from educational planning, for school building to issues of children in classroom who are slow learners. According to Bogdan and Declan, 1998, during the period from World War I to World War II, the modern survey as we know it began to emerge. Factors that contribute to its development were improvement in sampling technique and the social science field, including marketing research, journalism, public opinion research, and organization and characteristics. And next, what are the type of survey design? The type of survey design, the first, cross-sectional survey design. The researcher collect the data at one point in time. For example, when middle school children complete a survey about testing, they are recording data about their present views. This design has the advantage of measuring current attitudes and practice. It also provides information in a short amount of time, such as the time required for administering the survey and collecting the information. Second, a longitudinal survey design involves the survey procedure of collecting data about time with the same population dengan yang sama, change in a cohort group of subpopulation, or change in a panel group of the same individual over time. Thus, in longitudinal design, the participants may be different or the same people. Third, trend study in some survey. Researchers aim to study change within some general population over a period of time. This form of longitudinal research is called a trend study. Trend study are longitudinal survey design that involve identifying a population and examining change within that population over time. For a cohort study is a longitudinal survey design in which a researcher identifies a subpopulation based on some specific characteristic and then study that subpopulation over time. A five-panel study is a longitudinal survey design in which the researcher examines the same population over time. The high school center study in 1998 will be the same people study in 2000, 1 year after graduation, and again in 2002, 2 years after graduation. One disadvantage of a panel design is that individual may be difficult to locate, especially 2 years after graduating from high school. The advantage to this type of study, however, is that the individual study will be the same each time, allowing the researcher to determine actual change in specific individuals. Okay, and next, what are the key characteristics of survey design? The key characteristic of survey research. Survey researcher embraces sample selection of a sample form of population to which they can generalize result, collect data using questionnaires and interview that vary in form. For example, like mail questionnaire, web-based questionnaires, one-on-one interview, part 3 research, and one-on-one interview. Telephone interview and focus interview, and weigh the advantages and disadvantages of each. Administer well-tested instrument with good question and skill, and seek a high response rate from participants using procedures that will ensure a high return rate and will not be biased. Next, about how do you construct and analyze mail questionnaire? Because of the popularity of mail questionnaire for student research project, they deserve special attention. We will focus on 3 aspects of using mail questionnaire. First, a cover letter to invite participants to complete the questionnaire. Second, the form and construction of the questionnaire. And the last, statistical procedures typically used to analyze data from a mail questionnaire. The cover letter, a major component of a mail questionnaire, consists of a cover letter inviting the participant to take part in the study and to complete the instrument. Find this major element. The first, important of participant. To encourage individual to complete the questionnaire, mereka butuh mengetahui why they have been sent the instrument. The first few sentences indicate the importance of receiving and the value of the response. It's often helpful to begin a cover letter with this statement, as illustrated in this example. Purpose of the study, tujuan dari penelitian ini, termasuk include a statement indicating succinctly the intent or purpose of the study. The statement not only informed the participant about the nature of the study, but also fulfilled its important informed consent provision of identifying the purpose of the study for participants. And next, assurance of confidentiality. Also, to comply with informed consent and to be ethical, the investigator assures the individual of confidently, example, not identifying individuals specifically. Sponsorship. The cover letter includes the advisor name as well as the institution where fund her grammar word. In addition, we'll write the letter on letterhead stationery to add additional sponsorship. Completion time and written. Add to the letter an estimate of the amount of time the survey will take to be completed and the procedure for determining the instrument. Overall questionnaire consist examine complete meal questionnaire. For example, sample questionnaire as sample cover letter. How do you design and conduct an interview survey? First step of the interview researcher often use interview survey less frequently than mail questionnaire in educational research. Interview procedure often involve the need for the researcher to establish rapport with and gain the cooperation of the interview. Second, training of interview. If more than one interviewer is involved in a research project, each person needs training. This training might consist of a role-playing demonstration by an experienced researcher and a practice interview by the individual researcher who will be conducting the interview. Step in interview. The step in conducting an interview involve obtaining an interview survey, use and trying individual interview. Then the researcher gain access to the participant through a formal invitation, such as a cover letter, and establish a time and place to conduct the interview. During the interview, the survey researcher asks questions, indicate the response option to question, and the participant answer. The pace of the interview is set to be comfortable for the interviewee. When asking open-ended questions, the interviewer writes down answers to the question or tape record them. The interviewee ends with the researcher thanking the individual for the interview and telling the participant what the next step will be in the study. After the interview, the researcher may want to write down comments that help explain the data, such as the demeanor of the interviewee or specific about the situation. And then a telephone interview. Guide an example of telephone interview. Introductory remark to help establish rapport and direction for the interview. For example, like the amount of time required. Clearly mark boxes with instruction for each question in the interview so that each interviewer on the research team will ask the same question. Close-ended response option for each question with space between questions, permitting the interviewer to write an additional comment. Number in parentheses to indicate the column number for coding the response into a data grid of a computer file for statistical analysis. And then next about potential ethical issues in survey research. Potential ethical issues in survey research. Ethical issues in survey research involve engaging in good practice when survey research is examined by institutional review board. During data collection, attention needs to be given to using appropriate incentive and delivering on benefits guaranteed. The survey data collection procedure cannot put data collector at risk for the safety. Safety applies to the respondent or participant as well. Confidentiality of the response needs to be protected along with minimizing link between data respondent and participant. A link to response can be an effective means of protecting individual identified. Also, the researcher has an obligation to destroy survey instrument after the conclusion of the study. And next about what are the steps in conducting survey. The first step, decide if a survey is the best design to use. You need to decide whether survey research is the best design to use in study. Survey help describe the trend in population or describe the relationship among variable or compare group. The second step, identify the research question or hypothesis. You can address both research question and hypothesis in survey design. The third step, identify the population, the sampling frame, and the sample. The process of survey design begin with identify the population. The first step, determine the survey design and data collection procedure. The user must also determine if the survey study will be cross-sectional or longitudinal. And then the first step, develop or locate instrument to collect or measure the variable in study. The sixth step, administer the instrument. This step is perhaps the most time-consuming phase of survey research. Seventh step, analyze the data to address the research question or hypothesis. The data analysis procedure will reflect the type of research question or hypothesis the researcher plans to address in the study. The eighth step, write the report. You should write the survey study using a standard quantitative structure that consists of introduction, the review of the literature, the method, the result, and the discussion. And then criteria for evaluating survey research. Okay, the criteria for evaluating research. A good survey study includes the identification of the population and the sample content and adequate size sample systematically derived employs a cross-sectional or longitudinal design, specify the instrument and input sample question, determine whether score from them will likely be reliable and valid, use appropriate data analysis procedure to answer the question or hypothesis, and strengthen acknowledging ethical issues and using standard structure. And then next topic about grounded theory. Grounded theory enables you to generate a broad theory about your qualitative central phenomenon. Next, a grounded theory. Then theory enables you to generate a broad theory about your qualitative central phenomenon grounded in the data. As a systematic procedure, it appeals to a wide range of educational research. This chapter defines a grounded theory set, identify when to use it, assess the key characteristics of its examines for ethical issues in the design. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to define grounded theory research and describe when to use it and how it developed. Distinguish among three types of grounded theory design, identify the key characteristics of grounded theory research, identify some potential ethical issues in conducting grounded theory research, describe the steps in conducting a grounded theory study, evaluate the quality of grounded theory study. Okay, what is grounded theory research? When should you use it and how it develops? A grounded theory design is a systematic qualitative procedure used to generate a theory that explains at a broad conceptual level a process, an action, or an interaction about a substantive topic. In grounded theory research, this theory is a proses. Jadi di grounded research ini itu teorinya about the process. Process theory is explain educational process of event, activities, action, and interaction that occur over time. Also, grounded theories process through systematic procedure of collecting data, identifying categories, use synonymously with themes, connecting these categories, and forming a theory that explains the process. When do you use grounded theory? You use grounded theory when you need a broad theory or explanation of a process. Grounded theory generates a theory when existing theories don't address your problem or the participant that you plan to study. Because a theory is grounded in the data, it provides a better explanation than a theory borrowed off the shelf because it fits the situation actually work in practice. It's sensitive to individual in a setting and may represent all of the complexity actually found in the process. And then three types of grounded Three types of ground theory design. The first, three types of ground theory design. Ground theory research consists of three types: the systematic procedure of start and corbin, systematic procedure of start and corbin involve using predetermined categories to interrelate the categories, visual diagram, and specific proposition or hypothesis to make the connection explicit. The emergent design, consistent with Glaser 1992 ideas, rely on exploring a basic social process with preset categories. Three types of grounded design. The first is the systematic design. Systematic design in grounded theory emphasizes the use of data analysis step of open actual and selective coding and the development of a logic paradigm or a visual picture of the theory generate in the definition. This phrase of coding exists. In the first phrase, open coding. Open coding, the grounded theories for initial category of information about the phenomenon being studied by segmenting information. An example coding categories in grounded theory. Page 425, figure 13.1. And then the second, the emerging design. The third, the constructive design. The constructive has been actualized by Chalmers as a philosophical question to her list between the more positive example, more quantitative stand of Glaser and Trask and Corbin and postmodern research. And then key characteristics of grounded theory is that despite these differences, six aspect characteristics grounded theory. Grounded theory employs design to explore a process around substantive topic. They theoretically sample using a procedure of simultaneous data collection and analysis. Grounded theories analyze their data for increasing level of abstraction by using constant comparative procedure and asking questions about their data. Do the analysis of the data for category. Grounded theories identify a core category or central phenomenon that will process out into a theory. Grounded theories explore this process to develop a theory. Throughout the grounded theory procedure, grounded theories write memos to themselves. Potential ethical issue in grounded theories because of the focus of grounded theory on data analysis, not much discussion. Jadi tidak terlalu banyak diskusi of ethics has occurred in the grounded theory literature. However, throughout the process of research, grounded theories may be confronted with ethical challenges ranging from advancing the purpose of the study to the power and authority issues of engineering and on to building a usable chain of evidence from the data to the generation of the theory that will benefit those the study is intended to serve. Step in conducting a grounded theory study. The steps involved in conducting a grounded theory study are to start with the intent to develop a theory, to locate a process or action or interaction to study, to obtain necessary approval, to sample individuals who have experienced the process, to code data into categories or concepts, and to interrelate the categories of form a theory. Next, come validating the theory and writing the grounded theory report. Evaluating the quality of a grounded theory study. Several published criteria exist for evaluating the quality of a grounded theory study. A good grounded theory study presents a theory of a process grounded in the view of participants. This theory is developed from the memos written by the researcher, the linking of concepts or categories, the presentation of the theory as a visual model, and the use of systematic emerging or constructive approach. And next, and the last topic about ethnographic design. The last topic about ethnographic design. What is the ethnographic research? Ethnographic design are qualitative research procedure for describing, analyzing, and interpreting a culture-sharing group shared pattern of behavior, belief, and language that develop over time. Central to this definition is culture. A culture is everything having to do with human behavior and belief. It can include language, ritual, economic, and political structure, life stage, interaction, and communication style. When do you conduct an ethnography? You conduct an ethnography when the study of a group provides understanding of a large issue. You also conduct an ethnography when you have a culture sharing group to study on that has been together for some time and has developed shared value, belief, and language. The three types of ethnographic design. These historical factors have led to three types ethnographic: release, case study, and critical study. A release account is an objective account of a culture sharing group. It's written in third-person point of view, report on the information learned from participants, and place the researcher in the role of providing the final interpretation and presentation of the culture. Case study focuses on program, event, or activities and provide a detailed description and analysis of the case based off insights data collection. And the last, a critical ethnography is a type of ethnography in which the researcher advocate for a group marginalized in our society and focus on issues such as power and authority. Potential ethical issues in ethnographic research. Ethical issues in ethnography relate to fieldwork concern. These ethical issues involve such as topic as gaining access to the field, staying in the field, gathering data in the field, and the direction of being in the field of research. And then step in conducting an ethnographic. The step in conducting this ethnographies include starting with an interest in studying a cultural theme, identify a body site, and examining shared pattern for a group. The researcher poses general research question to identify shared pattern of behavior, belief or language, and also collect extensive fieldwork data. From this data, a general portrait of how the culture sharing group work is developed through description of ideas and interpretation. The interpretation and writing are sensitive to the reflexivity of the researcher, and varied forms of writing such are used. Conducting an ethnography involves clarifying the intent of the study, selecting an appropriate design, and relating the design to the research problem. Then the researcher needs to seek approval to conduct the study and obtain access to study site and participants. Once this is accomplished, the ethnographer collects data using multiple sources of information and spends considerable time in the field. After gathering information, the analysis of data consists of describing, analyzing, and interpreting. Some researchers, when conducting a critical ethnography, will identify changes that need to occur and will actively advocate and plan for them. When writing the final research report, ethnographer and case study writers employ practice consistent with their design, such as being objective or advocative, generalizing findings, and discussing how they and their participants change during the research process. Criteria for evaluating ethnography. Study in conducting a good ethnography. A researcher should pay attention to identifying the cultural issue to study, selecting a group to observe or interview over time, and noting shared pattern of behavior, language, and belief that the group has developed over time. The account needs to both describe the group and identify themes. Moreover, the researcher needs to provide evidence of being reflexive about their role in the study. Okay, I think enough about the 4 topics. Let's start from chapter 11 until chapter 14. Okay, I think it's enough. I apologize if there is mistaken. I will be mistaken. Thank you and see you next time.